No one in the city had ever seen a man with everything look so completely broken. Every night, while the skyline of glowing towers slowly faded into silence, he remained awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds like they were weights on his chest. 5 years, not 5 nights, not 5 weeks, 5 long years without real sleep. Doctors had come and gone, the best in the world. Expensive treatments, rare medications, private therapists, nothing worked. His condition became a quiet mystery among the elite, whispered about in business circles and luxury lounges. Some said it was stress. Others believed it was guilt. But no one truly knew the reason why a billionaire who owned half the city couldn't close his eyes for more than a few minutes at a time. His name was Adrian Vale, a man known for control, precision, and power. He built empires from nothing, turned risks into fortune, and never showed weakness. Not in public, not in private, but behind the glass walls of his penthouse, things were different. The nights were longer, the silence was louder, and the shadows, they didn't feel empty anymore. It wasn't just insomnia. Something felt off. At exactly 2:17 every night, without fail, Adrian would sit up, his heart racing, his breath uneven, like something had just shaken him awake. But there was never a dream, no memory, just a strange feeling like he wasn't alone in the room. For years, he tried to ignore it, until the staff started quitting. One by one, the maids, the housekeepers, even his personal assistants. They all left. Some made excuses. Others didn't say a word. But a few looked terrified. One woman even refused her final paycheck, walking out with pale hands and trembling lips, whispering something Adrian couldn't quite hear. "You should never have stayed here." That was the last thing she said. After that, the penthouse grew quiet again, too quiet. So when the agency sent a new maid, Adrian didn't expect much. Just another face that would disappear in a few weeks. He barely looked at her when she arrived. Simple clothes, calm posture, no sign of fear. Her name was Alina, and that was the first strange thing. She didn't ask questions. She didn't seem nervous. She didn't even look surprised by the silence in the house. Instead, she walked in like she already understood it. The first night passed like every other. Adrian stayed awake, pacing the floor, checking the time, waiting for that moment, 2:17. But something was different. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't wake up because somehow, without realizing it, he had fallen asleep. Deep sleep, real sleep. And when his eyes finally opened the next morning, the sunlight felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. His body was lighter, his mind quieter. For a moment, he thought it was over, until he noticed something that made his chest tighten. On the table beside his bed, there was a glass of water and a small note, written in neat, careful handwriting. "I told you, the house doesn't like being ignored." Adrian stared at the words, his fingers slowly tightening around the paper, because he hadn't told anyone about the house, not even himself. Adrian read the note again, slower this time, like the meaning might change if he gave it more attention. The house doesn't like being ignored. It sounded absurd, almost childish, and yet something about it didn't feel like a joke. He turned the paper over. Blank. No signature. No explanation. He stepped out of his bedroom and walked into the hallway, his bare feet silent against the polished floor. The penthouse looked the same as always, perfect, untouched, lifeless. But there was a faint smell in the air now, something warm, like tea or herbs. That alone was unusual. For years, the place had carried no scent at all, just cold air and silence. "Alina," he called out, his voice slightly rough. A moment later, she appeared from the far end of the corridor, calm as ever. "Good morning, sir." Adrian studied her closely this time. She looked ordinary. No nervous movements, no hesitation. Just steady eyes and a quiet presence. "Did you come into my room last night?" She didn't react the way most people would to that question. No confusion, no apology, just a simple answer. "You were finally resting. I didn't want to wake you." "That's not what I asked," he said, his tone tightening. "Did you leave this?" He held up the note. Her gaze shifted to the paper for a second, then back to him. "You read it, didn't you?" "That's not an answer." Alina tilted her head slightly, as if choosing her words carefully. Some things don't need to be answered directly, especially not here. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Adrian felt a strange irritation rise in his chest, mixed with something else, something he couldn't quite name. "You're a maid," he said, sharper now. "You're here to clean, not to speak in riddles." "I know why I'm here," she replied softly. "The question is, do you?" For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavier than usual, like the walls were listening. Adrian broke eye contact first. "Just do your job," he muttered, folding the note and slipping it into his pocket. "And don't enter my room without permission again." Alina nodded once. "Of course." But as she turned to leave, she paused. "You should try to sleep again tonight," she added, almost casually. "It's easier when you stop fighting it." Adrian didn't respond. He watched her walk away, her footsteps quiet, steady, too steady. It bothered him more than he expected. The rest of the day passed strangely. Meetings felt distant. Calls went unanswered. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't clouded by exhaustion. But that clarity didn't bring comfort. It brought questions. Too many questions. How had he fallen asleep so easily? Why did the house feel different? And most of all, how did she know? That night, Adrian didn't drink coffee. He didn't turn on every light like he usually did. Instead, he sat in the dim glow of the city outside his window, waiting, watching the clock. 2:16. His chest tightened slightly. 2:17. Nothing happened. No sudden jolt. No racing heartbeat. No invisible force pulling him out of nothingness. Just silence. For a moment, relief washed over him. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been haunting his nights was finally gone. Then he noticed something. From the corner of his eye, the bedroom door. It wasn't fully closed anymore, just slightly open. And behind it, he was sure he had locked it. Adrian didn't move at first. His eyes stayed fixed on the door, the narrow gap just wide enough to feel intentional. A cold thought slipped into his mind. Maybe it had always been like that. Maybe he had simply forgotten. But that didn't sit right with him. He was not a man who forgot things, especially not something as simple as locking a door. Slowly, he stood up. The room felt different again. Not darker, just heavier, like the air had weight. Each step toward the door felt louder than it should have, even though the floor made no sound. When he reached it, he paused, his hand hovering over the handle. Then, carefully, he pushed it open. The hallway outside was empty. Too empty. The lights were on, but there was a stillness that didn't feel normal. The kind of stillness that made you feel like you had just missed something. Adrian stepped out, scanning both sides. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just that faint smell again, warm, calming, out of place. "Alina?" he called, quieter this time. No response. He walked further down the hallway, past the living area, toward the kitchen. Everything looked perfectly arranged, like it had been prepared hours ago. A cup sat on the counter, steam barely visible, as if someone had just been there moments ago. But no one was. Adrian's jaw tightened. "This isn't funny," he muttered, though he wasn't sure who he was saying it to. Behind him, a soft sound broke the silence. Not loud, just enough. He turned quickly, but again, nothing, just a long corridor, stretching back toward his bedroom. For a second, he considered checking the security cameras. The system covered every corner of the penthouse. Nothing could move without being recorded. That thought usually gave him control. Tonight, it only made him uneasy, because something told him even that wouldn't explain this. He walked to his office and pulled up the footage anyway. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, bringing up the camera outside his bedroom. The timestamp showed 2:16. He leaned closer. There he was, inside the room, sitting by the window. And then at 2:17, the screen flickered. Just for a second. Adrian frowned and rewound it. Again, 2:16 normal. 2:17. A brief distortion. And when the image came back, the bedroom door was already open. Adrian's chest tightened. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. There was no moment where the handle turned. No frame showing the door moving. Just 1 second of static, and a change that didn't make sense. He leaned back slowly, running a hand through his hair. That's not possible. Some things don't follow the usual rules here. The voice came from the doorway. Adrian turned sharply. Alina stood there, her expression calm, almost like she had been expecting him to find this. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked. "Long enough," she said. He gestured toward the screen. "Explain this." She stepped closer, her eyes briefly glancing at the footage before returning to him. "You're looking for a normal answer in a place that stopped being normal a long time ago. That's not good enough," Adrian snapped. "This is my home." Alina's gaze softened slightly, but her words didn't. "Is it?" The question hit harder than he expected. Adrian looked away for a second, then back at her. "You're hiding something." "So are you," she replied quietly. The room fell silent again. Adrian clenched his fists. "I don't have time for games." "Then stop treating it like one," Alina said. "You think this is about sleep, about stress, about control. But it's not." She paused, studying his face. "You've been avoiding something for 5 years. In this house, it doesn't let things stay buried forever." A flicker of frustration crossed his face. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," she said. "More than the doctors. More than the people who left." That caught his attention. "What did they see?" he asked, his voice lower now. Alina hesitated. For the first time, there was a slight shift in her expression. "Not everything leaves when people walk away," she said finally. Adrian stepped closer. "And what does that mean?" Alina looked toward the hallway, then back at him. "It means," she said softly, "you weren't the only one who couldn't sleep in this house." The words settled into the room like a weight, and somewhere, deep in the silence, a faint sound echoed again. This time, it didn't feel like it came from the hallway. Adrian froze, his eyes slowly shifting toward the direction of the sound. It wasn't loud, but it was clear this time. A soft movement, like something brushing against the surface. Not from the hallway, not from the kitchen, from inside the penthouse, from somewhere closer. "Alina," he said under his breath, "did you hear that?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze moved past him toward the living area, as if she was listening more carefully than he could. Then she nodded once. "It's getting stronger." "Getting stronger?" Adrian repeated, a sharp edge in his voice. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said quietly, "it's not ignore you anymore." The word sent a chill through him, though he didn't want to admit it. Adrian straightened his posture, trying to regain control. "Enough," he said. "I'm not playing into this. There has to be a reason, a real one." But even as he said it, another sound followed, closer this time. A faint dragging noise, then a soft tap. Adrian turned toward the living room. The lights were still on, everything exactly where it should be, but something fell off again. Not visibly, just enough to make his instincts tighten. He walked forward, slower now, each step measured. Alina followed a few steps behind, her presence quiet but steady. As Adrian reached the center of the room, his eyes landed on the glass table. Something had changed. The objects on it, perfectly aligned earlier, were slightly out of place now. A book tilted just a little. A pen no longer parallel to the edge. It was small, too small for anyone else to notice. But Adrian noticed everything. "I didn't touch that," he said, more to himself than to her. "I know," Alina replied. Another tap, this time unmistakably from behind him. Adrian turned quickly, his eyes landing on the long mirror across the wall. For a split second, he thought he saw something move in it. Not in the room. In the reflection, he stepped closer, his heartbeat picking up despite himself. The mirror showed exactly what it should. Him, the room, Alina standing behind him. Nothing else. "You're tired," he muttered under his breath. "That's all this is." "You slept?" Alina said softly. "That's why you're finally seeing it." Adrian looked at her through the mirror. "Seeing what?" Before she could answer, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied again. But the room didn't feel the same after that. The silence had changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. Adrian turned fully, facing Alina now. You knew this would happen. She didn't deny it. I knew it would start, she said. Not like this, but yes. Start what? He demanded. Alina hesitated, and for the first time, there was something like concern in her eyes. You opening the door. I didn't open anything, Adrian snapped. She shook her head slightly. Not that door. The words barely settled before another sound echoed, louder now. A soft knock. 3 times. Both of them went still. The sound had come from the far end of the hallway, from the direction of Adrian's bedroom. He stared at Alina, his expression tightening. There's no one else here. I told you, she whispered. Not everything leaves. Another knock. 3 times again. More deliberate. Adrian swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. This is some kind of trick, he said, though his voice didn't sound as certain anymore. Someone's inside. Then go check. Alina said. He didn't move. The knocks came again, slower this time, like whoever, or whatever, was on the other side knew he was listening. Adrian took a step toward the hallway, then stopped. Something inside him resisted, a deep instinct warning him to stay exactly where he was. But another part of him, the part that had built empires, that refused to lose control, pushed him forward. I'm ending this tonight, he said. Alina didn't follow immediately. Adrian, she called softly. He paused but didn't turn back. If you open that door, she said, you won't be able to pretend anymore. He let out a slow breath, his hand curling into a fist. For 5 years, he said quietly, I haven't been able to sleep. I haven't been able to think clearly. I haven't been able to live like a normal person. Whatever this is, I'm done running from it. Another knock. Closer. Louder. Adrian walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. The air grew colder as he approached his bedroom. The door stood there, closed again now, like nothing had ever touched it. But the silence around it felt wrong. Alive. He reached out, his fingers hovering just inches from the handle. Behind him, Alina finally stepped forward, but she didn't try to stop him. Remember, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, it's not just a house that remembers. Adrian's hand touched the handle, and at that exact moment, the knocking stopped. Completely, the silence that followed was deeper than anything before. He slowly tightened his grip and began to turn it. The handle turned too easily. Adrian barely applied pressure, yet the lock clicked open like it had been waiting for him. A quiet, hollow sound followed, and the door slowly pushed inward on its own. He didn't touch it again. He just stood there, watching as the gap widened, inch by inch. Inside, the room looked exactly the same. The bed was untouched. The curtains still drawn. The faint city light slipping through the edges. Nothing out of place. And yet everything felt wrong. Adrian stepped in first. The air was colder than the hallway. Not freezing, just enough to make his skin tighten. He glanced back for a second. Alina stood at the doorway now, not entering, just watching with a look he couldn't fully read. What is this? He asked quietly. Alina didn't answer. Adrian took another step forward, scanning the room. His eyes moved to the bedside table. The glass of water was still there, but the note, it was gone. I left it here, he said, his voice low, controlled. I didn't move it. I know. Alina replied from behind him. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then where is it? Before she could respond, something shifted, not in front of him, behind him. Adrian turned quickly. The door was now fully open, and Alina wasn't standing there anymore. Enough, he muttered, his voice sharper now. This isn't funny. He stepped back toward the doorway, but as he reached it, he stopped. The hallway outside looked different, longer. The lights were dimmer, the walls slightly darker, like shadows had settled into them. It was still his penthouse, but not quite. Alina, he called out. No answer. He stepped into the hallway slowly, his breathing steady but deeper now. If this is some kind of test, it's over. Silence. Then, a voice. Adrian. He froze. The voice wasn't Alina's. It was familiar. Too familiar. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the hallway. Adrian. This time, it came from behind him, from inside the bedroom. His chest tightened. That voice! He hadn't heard it in years. Not since. No, he whispered under his breath. That's not possible. But the voice came again. Softer. Closer. You never listen? Adrian stepped back into the room, his pulse rising despite his effort to stay calm. Who's there? He demanded. No answer. Just silence. Then his eyes fell on the mirror. And this time, it wasn't just his reflection. Someone else was standing there. Not fully clear. Not sharp, but visible enough. A figure, standing just behind him. Adrian didn't turn right away. He stared at the reflection, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This isn't real, he said quietly. This is stress, sleep deprivation. That's all. 5 years, the voice said again. Adrian slowly turned around. No one there. His breathing grew heavier. You think it was the house, the voice continued. You think it started here. Adrian looked toward the mirror again. The figure was still there, clearer now, closer. You built everything to forget, it said, but you brought it with you. Adrian shook his head, stepping back. Stop. The air in the room felt tighter, like it was closing in. You locked the doors, the voice went on. You filled the silence. You ran from it. I said stop. Adrian snapped, louder now. The lights flickered again, and suddenly the note was back, on the bedside table, exactly where it had been. Adrian stared at it, his chest rising and falling faster now. Slowly, carefully he stepped toward it. His hand reached out, fingers slightly unsteady this time. He picked it up. The handwriting looked the same, but the words, they had changed. He read them once. Then again, his grip tightened, because this time the message wasn't about the house. It was about him. You didn't forget. You chose not to remember what happened that night. Adrian's hands went still. The words on the note didn't fade this time. They didn't change. They stayed there, heavy and clear, like something that had been waiting years to be said out loud. You chose not to remember what happened that night. His chest rose slowly, then fell. For a moment he didn't move. Then something inside him shifted, not fear this time, but recognition. That's not true, he said, though his voice had lost its edge. The room didn't answer, but the mirror did. When Adrian looked up again, the figure behind him was no longer blurred. It was clear now. A man, standing quietly, watching him, not threatening, not angry, just present. Adrian turned, and this time, the figure didn't disappear. It stood a few feet away, real in a way nothing else had been all night. Adrian's breath caught, not because the man was unfamiliar, but because he wasn't. It was someone he knew, someone he had spent years trying not to think about. You're not real, Adrian said quietly. The man didn't argue. He just looked at him, calm, steady. You've been saying that for 5 years. Adrian's jaw tightened. You're gone. I left, the man corrected softly. There's a difference. The words landed deeper than anything else had. Memories, quiet, blurred for years, began to press forward. Not loud, not overwhelming. Just enough. A conversation. A disagreement. A moment Adrian had walked away from and never turned back. I built everything after that, Adrian said, almost to himself. I moved on. You covered it, the man replied. That's not the same. Adrian looked down at the note in his hand, then back at him. Why now? Because you finally stopped running, the man said. You slept? The room grew still again, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt waiting. Adrian took a slow breath, his shoulders lowering just slightly. So what is this? Some kind of punishment? No, the man said. It's a choice. A choice, Adrian repeated. To remember, he said, or to keep living like you have been. Adrian let out a quiet, humorless breath. You think it's that simple? No, the man said gently. That's why it took 5 years. The silence stretched between them. For the first time since all this began, Adrian didn't feel the need to fight it. He didn't look away. He didn't try to explain it. He just stood there, and slowly, he nodded. I remember, he said. The words were quiet, but they carried something real. The air in the room shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough. The tension that had been sitting in his chest for years began to loosen. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt calm. Adrian blinked, and the man was gone. The room returned to normal. The mirror showed only his reflection. The hallway outside looked the way it always had. And for the first time in years, nothing felt out of place. Adrian stood there for a long moment, letting it settle. Then he walked to the bed and sat down slowly. No noise, no knocking, no strange presence. Just quiet, real quiet. He lay back, staring at the ceiling. And within minutes, sleep came, not forced, not interrupted, just natural, the kind he hadn't felt in years. Morning light filled the room. Adrian opened his eyes, steady and clear. No confusion. No, wait, just a strange sense of peace. For a moment, he stayed there, letting himself breathe. Then he sat up. The glass of water was still on the table. And beside it, another note. Adrian reached for it, slower this time. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was the same, but the message, it wasn't what he expected. You did well, but this wasn't the part you forgot. Adrian's expression changed. The calm that had just settled in his chest shifted again. He looked around the room quickly, then toward the doorway. "Alina," he called. No answer. He stood up, moving into the hallway. The penthouse looked normal. Too normal. "Alina," he called again. Still nothing. Adrian's eyes moved back to the note in his hand. His grip tightened slightly, because for the first time, he realized something didn't add up. He had remembered the man. He had faced it. The sleepless nights. They were gone. So, why did it still feel like something was unfinished? And more importantly, why did it feel like Alina had known that all along? Adrian stood in the middle of the hallway, the note still in his hand, his mind no longer clouded by exhaustion, but sharper, more aware. The silence around him felt different now. Not heavy, not threatening, just honest. "Alina?" he called again, walking toward the kitchen, then the living area. Nothing. No footsteps. No quiet presence. No sign she had ever been there. That alone should have confused him, but instead, a strange clarity settled in. For the first time, he wasn't reacting out of fear. He was thinking. He walked back to the bedroom slowly and looked around again. Everything was in place, just like before, but now he noticed something he had ignored for years. The small things. A drawer slightly open. A picture frame turned just a little away. A stack of documents he hadn't touched in a long time. He moved toward the desk and opened the drawer fully. Inside were old files, letters, notes, things he had pushed aside when he decided to move on. His fingers hovered over them for a second before he picked one up. It was a letter, unfinished, his own handwriting. Adrian frowned slightly as he read the first few lines. It wasn't about business. It wasn't about money. It was personal. And then it came back to him. Not the moment he had already faced, but what came after it. The silence, the distance, the decision to never respond. He had told himself it didn't matter. That time would take care of it. That focusing on success was enough. But it wasn't. He had remembered the person, but not the responsibility. Not the part where he chose to leave things unresolved. Adrian exhaled slowly, setting the letter down. "So that's what you meant," he said quietly. No answer came, but he didn't expect one this time. He walked over to the window, looking out at the city that had once felt like his greatest achievement. It still stood there, unchanged, but something inside him had shifted. For 5 years, his insomnia wasn't just about fear or stress. It was about avoidance. The mind doesn't rest when something important is left unfinished. He looked back at the room one last time, then picked up his phone. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name he hadn't touched in years. His thumb hovered over it. Then he pressed call. The line rang once, twice, a third time. Then someone answered. There was no dramatic reaction, no sudden rush of words, just quiet on both ends. Adrian swallowed, then spoke, his voice steady. I should have called a long time ago. The silence on the other end didn't feel empty. It felt open. And that was enough. Adrian didn't say everything in that moment. He didn't try to fix 5 years in one call. But he stayed. He listened. He didn't walk away this time. When he finally ended the call, something inside him felt lighter than it had in years. Not perfect, but real. That night, Adrian didn't wait for 2:17. He didn't watch the clock. He simply turned off the lights and lay down. The room stayed quiet. No knocks. No shifting shadows. No strange presence. Just calm. And when sleep came, it stayed. Days passed, then weeks. The penthouse no longer felt like a place he had to escape from. It became what it was always meant to be. A home. As for Alina, no agency had any record of her. No file. No hiring request. Nothing. It was as if she had never existed. But Adrian never tried to explain it. Some things don't need clear answers. Sometimes they come into your life for a reason and leave when that reason is fulfilled. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Adrian stood by the window again. His reflection looked different now, not because of success, but because of peace. He turned to leave the room, then paused. On the table beside his bed, there was a small note. Adrian walked over, slower this time. He picked it up. A faint smile touched his face as he read it. "You can rest now." He folded the note carefully and placed it back down. This time, he didn't question it. He simply turned off the light and let the silence stay exactly as it was.